It's late August, still summer though. And for a lot of folks, because it's still summer, well, we're trying to hold on to that last piece of that more casual, relaxed feeling you normally kind of associate with this time of the year, but for just a little bit longer. And when we're kind of in summer mode, sometimes we're not always alert to what's going on around us. The things we see and we hear, they're not quite as clear and crisp, or maybe we're not quite ready to receive clear and crisp messages because we're still in summer mode. What happens when important things go by during this time of the year? Do we really kind of sit up and take note? Well, for example, take Jesus in the gospel these last few weeks, these weeks during, say, June, July, and August. A few things that he has said. Let me just kind of give you some snippets, okay? The kingdom of God is at hand. Love God with all your heart, being, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor. Love your enemies. Your life will be demanded of you, and all these things you've prepared, to whom will they belong? Much will be required of those persons entrusted with much, still more required of those persons entrusted with more. I have come to set the earth on fire, and I cannot wait for it to come. Jesus has had a lot to say to us this summer in Luke's gospel. And hearing those phrases, that's kind of like, it reminds me of the phrase my parents used to have. They said, you should sit up in your chair straight and listen. When that kind of language comes out, we need to be attentive. Sit up straight in our chairs and listen. Words that might make you shiver a little bit when you hear them. Have these words penetrated our summer consciousness? Jesus is talking about salvation. He's been building up to this all through Luke's gospel that we've been hearing proclaimed this summer. Today's gospel, with wailing and gnashing of teeth, and passing through narrow gates, and crowds standing outside and knocking on the doors, they can't get in. This could all have something to do with it, right? I mean, this is Jesus we are talking about. So you can take a deep breath and remember that the gospel itself is part of God's saving plan. When we hear the gospel today and in these recent weeks, it confronts us today in this summer 2022. And really, to be honest, we do need to sit up straight. We might feel that shiver, and that's a very, very legitimate feeling. No two ways about it. Jesus is speaking prophetically to us today and in the recent weeks. And he has a warning for us. Do you remember early on in the gospel today that man who asked the question, will only a few be saved? Some might say now, as they said then, Jesus, we ate and drank with you. You taught in our streets. We're getting in, right? The man's question might seem a little strange. He's not asking, will I be saved? What must I do? I think he's trying to approach it from the other direction. Hey, Jesus, have I done enough? What do I have to do? It's almost like listening to somebody in high school saying, hey, teacher, what do I need to do to pass this course? It's almost like, is there a threshold that I need to meet? Have I met it yet? Almost like it's kind of reducing it to a math question. When you add it all up, is the answer big enough, good enough? It's almost turning into, what must I do to get by? Jesus doesn't answer that question. Instead, he says, the answer is to strive to enter through the narrow gate. Strive to enter through the narrow gate. What's that mean? Strive is kind of a funny word in our day and time. Often, when you hear people talk about striving, they're talking about working hard, achieving, perhaps to struggle against something, to overcome. Something you usually do by yourself. Solitary struggles, working hard, nose to the grindstone, things like that. Let me speak to it this way to a certain generation. Very Horatio Alger, right? That kind of stuff. Maybe your striving is different, is focused differently. Maybe you're striving to get or become the biggest or the best. But that's not what Jesus is asking us to do when he says strive to enter through the narrow gate. That kind of striving is not leaving room for God's grace, mercy, healing, and love to be active in my life or in your lives. Because all that other striving is very solitary. No room for anybody else, God included. Where does God fit into that vision of striving? God doesn't fit. I'm certain that Jesus didn't consider striving in that solitary individual kind of way. In the gospel you heard proclaimed today by Deacon Steve, striving has everything to do with being known by Jesus. Striving is our deep desire to be in relationship with the living God. Now, how many times have you heard someone say over the course of your life, it's all about being in the right place at the right time? Striving, gospel striving, puts you in the right place and right time to hear and to respond to God's saving ways. Striving is how you pray, how you live, walk through life with your eyes and your ears attuned to the wonder of God's creation, and to have a very open awareness of all the places where injustice and suffering seem to be gaining an upper hand in our world. Jesus, especially in Luke's gospel, has an eye for the poor. Where are we when it comes to that? This gospel striving really admits that we are unfinished. It leaves plenty of room for us to participate in the grace and healing and mercy and love that God rains down upon us. God's healing, God's saving grace is so essential to us. Gospel striving is not solitary. It's not lonely. It's not about coming out on top. Gospel striving is about walking with the Lord, and it's alongside, among, in relationship with God and neighbor. On the other side of summer, there is the fall. For many, fall means new focus, new stride, things to do, getting on with things, putting the casual aside. Hey folks, no more endless summer. On the other side of striving, there's a gift, and it's finding yourself in Jesus Christ, even if only for a few moments a day. I live now no longer for myself, but Christ lives in me. Striving, gospel striving, is a gift that's not about doing the minimum, but it's not about doing what I can do to get by. It's about how I strive to love for the one who brought the Israelites out of bondage in Egypt, who raised Jesus from the dead, and who promises to do the same for us forever and ever.